Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and we are brought to you by Fantrax, of course. And if you are not subscribed to RotoWire.com, RotoWire.com/pod will get you access over there. This is the 400th episode of the RotoWire Prospect Podcast, and my guest today is the great Rob Silver, who's been on the podcast many times. So couldn't have worked out better there. Rob, thank you so much for joining me tonight. How you doing, man?
You don't look a day over like 380 episodes, James. Great to hear. That's a big milestone. Like for a podcast, that's huge. 400 episodes.
Yeah, man, it's been a lot of them for sure. And I really appreciate your flexibility today. I'm the only healthy person in the Anderson household right now, so Rob was very generous to move this a little bit later in the day for me. And Rob, we're gonna talk about some guys that maybe are a little controversial in drafts. Some kind of guys that maybe I'm not going to be going after, or guys that I'm definitely going to be going after. Some guys that I know you are interested in. But with this being such a kind of an interesting pivot year almost for the Blue Jays, you're up there in Canada. You follow the Toronto Blue Jays very closely. I'm just curious, sort of, what are your expectations specifically from Vlad Guerrero and Bo Bichette in these big contract years for them?
I am, in fact, in your 51st state right now as we speak, James. Vlad's easy. I think Vlad is an easy first-round pick. I have him a little bit higher than ADP. I think he should be going base. Difference between him and Juan Soto is a coin flip to me. They're basically the same guy. So I have him as a top 10 player. You can obviously get him a little bit later in most drafts, but he's look, there's three ways you can go about the first round as far as I can see. There's lots of great players who want speed and power coming out of the first round. And that's a great approach, right? Like, let's get 75 out of my first three hitters, home runs and stolen bases. So I want those guys. And there's obviously a bunch of guys in the first round who meet that criteria, if that's what you're looking for. Vlad is not one of them. There are other people who just take the best guy available. I rank them 1 through 15, and when my pick's up, I'm taking the guy, whether he's power, whether he's speed. I just want the most value, safest, however I'm ranking them. That's fine too. The third way is with the changing landscape of the past couple of years, and speed is easier to find, I think it's fair to say, later in drafts. 40-40 guys are always going to be a rare commodity. 30-30 guys are a rare commodity. But guys who hit 30 home runs with 300 batting average are gold, and you cannot find those guys later in the draft. So there is something to be said about Vlad in the first round. Whether it's for you or not is based on how you want to build your team. Bo, I think, is way more complicated. So lots of smart people are of the view that Bo Bichette is the best bounce back candidate in the draft this year. Easy. It's free money. Look where he's going. Look where he used to go. He was hurt last year. Draft Bo Bichette. And totally get the logic to that. Let's assume he's healthy and that he's going to be healthy for 6 months. So let's take that as a given. I don't want to debate whether he's going to be healthy or not, because we don't know whether it's going to recur or not. So it's a boring debate whether as of today he is healthy in spring training. The question to me is, just to play a bit of devil's advocate, because I get the Bo was a great hitter. He got hurt. He had a bad season. Give him a free pass on that. The question I have is, bounce back to what with Bo? Is if he bounces back to his 2023 season, where he had 20 home runs, 5 stolen bases, a 300 batting average, is that a bounce back, James? Like, are you satisfied if you draft Bo at ADP with his 2023 line?
I mean, I'm not going to complain if I take a guy going outside the top 100 and I get 306 average over 600 plate appearances and 20 homers. I would assume that people who are taking Bo Bichette would be hoping for a little bit more in the power department and a little bit more in the stolen base department.
Yeah. He was in ninth. he was a 94th player on the player rater, on the Rasball player rater in 2023. So you're making a profit, but given there is risk, like he was horrible last year, even before he got hurt. I'm not sure 2023 is what you're drafting for. The batting average, I think, is the most likely skill set to come back. Second is power. Like, look, Bo has a lot riding on this season. It's wild, the range of outcomes for Bo Bichette going into next winter. If he looks like a generational hitter again, like a star hitter, it's easy to see him getting a $200 million plus contract, even if you have skepticism about his defense long term. Like, he's going to give me 2 more seasons at shortstop, and then he's my second baseman, and then I'm in year like 6 of the contract. So whatever, he's my left fielder, he's my DH, and I don't really care. He could also be like a guy who's sitting with his agent saying, should I take the qualifying offer if he's anything like last season? And that's not hyperbole. Like, he really was bad last year, and he was hurt. And I think like both, or somewhere in the middle, obviously. So I think Bo's a good pick, but I don't think it's a layup that a lot of people think it is. I think maybe he decides to just run because it's a contract year, but I wouldn't pay for that. And maybe the power comes back and he's a 25 home run guy instead of an 18 to 20 home run guy. But I'm not sure about that. I think 300 batting average is a pretty good chance you're going to get from him, though. And that's worth a lot.
Do you think it's worth do you think it's worth speculating at all? Like, obviously you follow the team fairly closely. Like, do you have any insight into Bo Bichette's psyche as to, like, is he the type of guy that is going to rise to the occasion in a big year like this?
I think he, despite coming from a baseball family, obviously, thinks he's a good baseball player and wants to get paid and wants a future. He's he knows last year was crap. So I think to the extent you buy into contract year, I'm motivated. I don't think he's a sulking guy. Like, he sucked last year. He's not hiding the fact that he sucked last year. He put in work in the offseason to get healthy. So we'll see. I would take Bo Bichette at ADP, but to the extent there is helium coming to Vegas, and I could easily see, as he's on so many people's, like, I want Bo Bichette, he's a good buy. I could see him going up. I'm not chasing him up. I like there are a lot of middle infielders I like. So I don't need Bo Bichette.
Right. That's sort of where I have been with him. Is I look at the other shortstops that go kind of in the early 100s, and they're pretty much all going to get me more stolen bases, and in some cases significantly more stolen bases. And you still have some guys, like, I think, Mason Wynn is going to hit for a pretty high average this year. So
that's a total, and that is part of it. Is if I've taken the build early where I want power early and a batting average early, then Bo Bichette's sort of useless to me. I need Mason Wynn and 20 plus stolen bases potential right. For more there. Bo could do that, but I'm 5, 7, 10. That's kind of where I'm pegging Bo realistically.
So I sent you a picture of the first 2 rounds worth of AAV over the last couple weeks of NFBC online auction championship auctions. And I asked you, Rob, the first 2 rounds worth of guys, they're all going for 26 or more on average. And I'm not going to ask about the pitchers. We might get to some of these guys a little later, but obviously pitchers come with a different type of risk than hitters. But of the hitters who are on average going for 26 or over, who do you think is the riskiest of these hitters?
So I noticed that Freddie Freeman was cut off like the next hitter, because that would be the pretty easy, lazy answer and sort of a boring answer at this point, going Freddie Freeman. I think he's been averaging $25 the last week. So I'm not going to do that. I'm also not going to do like Julio, Carroll, Mookie, Tatis. A lot of people have made the cases, some on your podcast over the winter, about why they're risky first round guys. And I think that's sort of boring remaking the case. So I'm going to do something that's going to piss people off and be more
Good.
provocative, more interesting. And when I say he's the riskiest, let me just be crystal clear. I'm not making the case that he's going to be useless, and I'm not making the case that like he's going to be out of baseball, he's going to be in the minors, anything like that. But if I'm in an auction and I'm spending $46 on a guy, I don't want him returning $25. That's the risk that I'm going to talk about, and it's Elly De La Cruz. And I'm going to make the case for why I think Elly is riskier than people think he is. And I know he's going to hit 7 more home runs in the next 2 days at spring training, and I will be getting a lot of tweets and messages about you're an idiot, which Elly is absolutely a guy who can make me look like an idiot. So he stole 67 bases last year. He attempted 83 steals. Last year, he only had 151 stolen base opportunities. Let me explain that statistic, because it's not one a lot of people look at, because it's really a baseball reference, mostly statistic. That's how many times are you on first or second with the next base open. So you have an opportunity. It discounts double steals because it's just noisy. 151 stolen base opportunities. Sorry, that's and given how many plate appearances he had, that's a staggeringly low number. His stolen base opportunities per plate appearance was the second fewest amongst hitters with at least 20 stolen base attempts. Now, I accept that Elly could improve as a hitter. He could cut down on his strikeouts. He can improve his walk rate. He can just hit more singles. But that's part of the challenge. It's a double-edged sword with Elly. He strikes out so much. He does hit home runs. He doesn't walk a ton, and therefore he's just not on base that often with the opportunities. But he did steal 83 or attempt 83 stolen bases last year. He attempted stolen base on 54% of the times he had an opportunity. That is, James, a wild number. To put it into perspective, Rickey Henderson, for his career, the great Rickey Henderson, attempted stolen bases 32% of the time he had an opportunity. So he's more than 50% higher, running 50% more of the time than Rickey Henderson did in his career. If you knock last year, if you keep the stolen base opportunities constant and knock him down to the second most attempts, which was 40%, suddenly he loses 15 stolen bases. So he goes from 67 stolen bases to 52 stolen bases. If you give him Rickey Henderson's stolen base attempt numbers, and I've done some studies over previous winters. This was when Alberto Mondesi was the big thing, because Mondesi, and it didn't work out, but this was where I became obsessed with Mondesi. Because Mondesi also, when he had one of those Septembers, he was just running 75%. It was a ridiculous number too. And you find, like lots of statistics, it regresses. People have a baseline. So obviously, by definition, if I'm a speedster, where my baseline of how often I run is going to be normalized at a different level from a 350-pound first baseman. But nobody in baseball history has normalized anywhere close to where Elly was last year. And if you give him Rickey Henderson's number and you assume his opportunities stay the same, which again assumes he plays every single day, doesn't sprain an ankle, doesn't get the odd Sunday off, but you keep his home runs the same, then he becomes a 25, 40, 260 player instead of what he was last year. Now, that's an amazing player, but that's Jazz. That's Jazz Chisholm. Jazz Chisholm was player 30 last year, a $25 player. So I'm not burying Elly, but I haven't really I don't think anything I have said is controversial. And I think there's a massive risk that Elly is still awesome, that he plays every day, that his power stays the same. Obviously, he could hit 2, 3, 4 more home runs. He could also hit 2, 3, 4 less home runs. To be fair, his home run to fly ball numbers are also very high. But I think the power is obviously very real with him. But if I'm paying $46, a $25 return Again, great season still. Sucks donkeys, James, if I'm in an auction. So my case for the riskiest player, not named Freddie Freeman, that's going anywhere close to it here, is Ellie.
Yeah, I buy that. I took Gunner over Ellie with the 4th overall pick in that too early meatball DC with Rob, and it quickly became clear that Ellie was the 4th guy by ADP all season, basically. But he wouldn't be the
interesting thing about Gunner, and obviously he's got a bit of an oblique injury. I said this on the launch angle last week, and maybe I used my superpowers to curse him. When you look at the stolen base opportunity numbers, he's almost at the exact opposite from Ellie De La Cruz. I think there is, assuming health, I think there's sneaky stolen base upside with Gunner. I think that, like, if he changes nothing, but he regresses up and Ellie regresses down, I don't think he's a 40 stolen base guy, but I think you could get an extra 10, 15 stolen bases that you're not, certainly the public projections, and you're not paying for right now. So it's weird to say with a 1st round pick that there's upside, again, assuming health, but I think there's actually some stolen base upside that people don't realize. He's just on base so often. Right.
Yeah, he's such a good hitter. He's such a good power hitter. And then back to Ellie, not even like removing the risk or the stolen bases part, but he is going to hit, or at least any projection system will tell you that he's going to hit for the lowest average of any hitter until we get down to Jazz, right?
I was being kind on the batting average. I didn't want to rest my case on the fact that he has batting average downside. And look, if he's giving you 70 stolen bases, you figure out batting average down the road. I'm not burying Ellie, but there's no doubt you are behind the 8 ball on batting average coming out of the 1st round if that's who you've drafted.
Yeah. We had one guy in the comments asking what Ricky Henderson did in his prime.
It was a bit higher. So that's a great point. So when Ricky was younger at the beginning of his career, he wasn't quite, he had a couple of seasons that he was in that, and then it started coming down. So I don't know what Ellie's going to do. I'm making a case. I think probabilistically there's certainly a scenario he comes down. But yes, I'd be unfair and dishonest if I didn't say that Ricky did have seasons where he was higher. That was his average over his entire career. The other thing I'd say is, like, Ricky Henderson obviously got on base at a ridiculous pace. So he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT leadoff hitter for a reason. So it's not I use Ricky just illustratively, but you can look at Vince Coleman. You can look at like prime base stealers. Ellie, maybe this is his level, but I think that it's more likely to come down. It's also possible, like, not to keep repeating myself, James, that he gets better. Like, he's young enough that he could get on base more, and that's not crazy whatsoever.
Yeah, like, I think I wouldn't take him in the top 3, but I know he is like the only person who has snuck into the top 3, or the only guy who does it occasionally. And if you're taking him there, I think you're just betting on him being a better hitter this year than he was last year. You're not betting on him being the same hitter. Okay, let's head to a quick break here. When we come back, though, we're going to revisit a Chris Sale versus Tyler Glasnow combo that Rob and I had last year, and look at a pitcher who's going kind of in the same range as Chris Sale was last year, and see if Rob is interested in the price there. All right, we're brought to you by Fantrax, and Fantrax is the best place to play fantasy baseball, especially dynasty baseball, and it's where I'm doing my Tout Wars draft and hold draft right now. It's just got the best layout, the deepest player pool. You don't have to be texting your commissioner about adding some high schooler to the player pool. They're already there. And it's also got the most customizable league settings. They've got so many different stats you can set up for your league. It's so much fun. You build like the perfect lead with all the stats you want. So sign up for free today. Be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. The NFBC RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Online Championship is live. Play fantasy baseball against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFBC this baseball season. Jeff Erickson, James Anderson, that's me, Clay Link, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFBC Online Championship for a shot at $150K. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. Feel free to, that'll do it for the messages from our sponsors. And yeah, so Rob, last year I suggested that Chris Sale was essentially Tyler Glass now, but 4 rounds later, and you essentially agreed, and that worked out very well. I don't see quite that obvious of a guy sort of in that range this year, but I feel like I am preferring the idea of Spencer Strider in the 7th round to Garrett Crochet or Jacob deGrom in the 2nd round. Essentially just kind of taking the long view of the season, looking at how many innings I think is realistic for all 3 of those guys and the skills of all 3 of those guys. It just doesn't quite seem like it should be a 5-round gap to me. But how do you feel about drafting Spencer Strider this year? And feel free to weigh in on Crochet and deGrom as well.
Okay, I'll start with deGrom because it's the easiest. I think deGrom is the easiest fade in drafts this year, and I don't think it's even close. So without using his health history, I'm going to make the case on why that's true, because everybody who's listening to this podcast knows the risk, the massive risk in terms of how many innings you're going to get, how many innings the Rangers are going to get with Jacob deGrom. Jacob deGrom is 37 this year. If you are spending a 2nd-round pick on Jacob deGrom and every single projection, you're counting on at least 10 strikeouts per 9 innings from Jacob deGrom. I think that's a fair statement. There are 2 pitchers in the history of baseball who have gotten that level of strikeouts in 100 or more innings at 37 or older, Nolan Ryan and Randy Johnson. Now, Jacob deGrom is obviously a tremendous pitcher, but as you know, James, I hate drafting guys who have to do historic things or near historic things in order to return value. And I think point 1 is I don't think people realize just how good Jacob deGrom needs to be at his age in order to be the pitcher we think of when we think of Jacob deGrom. Number 2, there are 2 pitchers very recently who did this, though. And we can dreamcast on those pitchers and say, well, if they can do it, why can't Jacob deGrom do it? And I'm going to talk about Max Scherzer's 2022 season when he was 37 years old. So let's go through Max Scherzer's 2022 stats and see if, like, just gut-wise, if we think that deGrom could get there. So Scherzer threw 145 innings. Do you agree with me, James? If you got 145 innings from Jacob deGrom, that is both his max, and you are ecstatic with that. You're certainly not expecting, and I don't think the Rangers would let him throw much more than that. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I'd consider it.
It's a huge win.
Yeah, that's best case scenario.
Best case scenario. Scherzer in 2022 had a 2.29 ERA. We know deGrom can do that, but after pitching so little, I think that's better than you could plausibly say you're expecting. It's possible, but you're not expecting a 2.29 ERA. Is that fair?
Yes.
Scherzer in those 145 innings had a 30.6% strikeout rate. Great. I think deGrom will probably hit that kind of, in whatever innings he throws, something ish like that, +2, -2, but that's the range, 31%. Fair?
Yep.
0.91 whip in those 145 innings. Fantastic by Scherzer. We know deGrom can do that. But again, like the ERA, that's like you nailed that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then 11 wins in 23 starts. Wins are wins, but it's not like he got buried in wins, Scherzer, in that year. So that is, I don't know if it's your 85th percentile outcome for deGrom or a 90th percentile for deGrom, but if you got those numbers, you were doing backflips. Like, you nailed that pick. Only problem with that is Max Scherzer was the 57th player on the player rater this year, in 2022, sorry. A 4th round value. And again, you just nailed it. Like, that's awesome what Scherzer did in 2022. If you get that from Jacob deGrom, you're ecstatic. You're not pissed off, but you did lose money. So I think if Jacob deGrom were going in the 7th round, he'd be a really interesting risk, upside downside. Like, not to be Dr. Dave here, but you can say I will never draft Jacob deGrom. Fair. But if you were going in the 6th, 7th round, we're having a discussion about things. I think in the 2nd round, it's just ludicrous, because I could make the case for why he's going to be worse than every one of those statistics, plus the age, plus the injury history. So I don't understand what people are thinking in terms of deGrom this year.
Yeah, I think that's a very well laid out case. And I haven't drafted Jacob deGrom. I haven't considered drafting him, as you could probably tell by the question. So yeah. I'm with you on that.
I feel like it's almost like I'm like Kramer beating up on 12-year-olds when I'm beating up on Jacob deGrom, but it's not cheap because he is going in like the 2nd round, so like, or 3rd round, or wherever he goes. Crochet I really like, so I don't include the two of them. Like, I think Crochet's going to be a stud even before it's not based on today's spring training where he obviously looked really, really, really good. I think Crochet's going to be awesome. There's injury risk, but I think it's a manageable injury risk. Strider, which was your actual question, I feel is way riskier than Sale was last year. And part of it's just gut. Part of it, we know he's missing the first month of the season. Now, I'd rather, in some ways, there's the truism fantasy that is sunk in that, like, injuries are going to find you. You don't find injuries. Don't draft injured guys. And there's a great logic to that. In some ways, I'd rather I know he's going to be healthy and ready, like the Ronald Acuna argument. Again, I'm not making a case for drafting Ronald Acuna at cost, but like, I can backfill for, if I knew Spencer Strider's making his debut on May 1st, I can plan out my bench. I can plan out like matchups going into a draft to get through that first month, as opposed to like a Glasnow, who I'm like, I know he's going to get hurt, but I don't know when, and I'm going to have to hold him at some point. I don't know how many other injuries I'm going to have, and what a pain in the butt that's going to be. The internal brace surgery really worries me. Like, I just feel like we have an understanding now about Tommy John and how players respond to Tommy John and how players recover and what the penalty is in the first year versus the second year. I'm just not smart enough to know what the penalty is for internal brace. I don't know what the risk is for a player who's had Tommy John, then has internal brace in that season that he comes back, and especially a guy who throws as hard as Strider. So all in, like, 7th round is still a really early pick for me. Like, he's going to be my 2nd or 3rd starting pitcher, depending on how I build my team with closers and stuff. And there's a lot of starting pitchers going in the rounds after that, like rounds 8, 9, 10, 11, that are obviously not peak Spencer Strider, because we know that's like the best pitcher in baseball. Him and deGrom, best 2 pitchers in baseball every inning that they're throwing, if they're on and they're right. But they're good enough and just feel safer. That for me, it doesn't feel like the same type of risk that Chris Sale was last year at all.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't compare the level of risk. And then, with Chris Sale last year, like, he pitched better than anyone who drafted him would have even been hoping for. And, I think like Strider's a better pitcher talent wise this offseason than like I would have thought of Sale last offseason, but you're 100% right about the elevated risk. And I Dr. Dave's here in the comments saying that I got to get off of Strider by mains. I don't think I'm going to end up with Spencer Strider in any of my main events.
Just so Dave knows, when I said I'm not being Dr. Dave, I meant that as a compliment, not as a shot.
Yeah, and I'm not going to take deGrom. I'm not going to take Crochet. I recognize the talent.
You just also injury risk for you, Crochet?
It's just like he's going in the middle of the second round, and he's never had back-to-back 150 inning seasons, and he's never even had two 150 inning seasons in his life. So, he could certainly he could blow past last year's innings, finish with 185 innings this year, SP1, top 5 on the player radar. Like I recognize that upside.
Let me ask. It's not on the outline, but I'll ambush you here. Where is Sandy? Assume Sandy Alcantara looks as dominant in every spring start between now and when we're in Vegas as he has so far. Like, you can't watch baseball and not say he's looked really, really good, and obviously his velocity is awesome. Where is he going in mains by Saturday in Vegas? And are you interested in him wherever your answer is?
I don't think I'll follow him up draft boards. I have a couple Alcantara shares already, which I feel good about. But I think in Vegas, 5th round, I don't know. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. I mean, I think people are just going to keep he's an obvious just leapfrog, chase it up the board.
Like if you.
And like Jeff Passan's column today just gives fuel. Scouts are raving. Like the narrative just builds itself for chasing Sandy, right?
Well, but are the Marlins like the worst team that has had a pitcher? Like if we said Sandy has a top 75 main event ADP, like, have we seen a pitcher on a team that bad have a top 75?
I mean, their lineup makes the White Sox lineup look interesting. If their lineup's horrendous, their bullpen's horrendous. So, like, we're all too sophisticated to chase wins, but it is one of the 4 categories that a starting pitcher can possibly contribute to. So when you put together, like, he looks awesome now, but it's not a linear process for guys coming back from the surgery, plus the wins, like the context. That's not interesting to me. One last ambush starting pitcher. Where does Sasaki go in mains? Again, assuming he is as like softcore pornography to watch like he was yesterday in his start. So assume he just keeps doing that and the hype builds. How high does he get?
I mean, I think there's probably a guy, like if he keeps doing, like you're saying, like kind of keeps the momentum going, I feel like there's probably a guy in most mains that takes him like at the 2-3 turn.
Yeah. And why is his injury risk? Well, I shouldn't say that. You didn't say you're going to be going anywhere. Is his injury risk higher than Crochet, lower than Crochet, the same as Crochet?
Higher.
Much higher.
Much
higher. To me, also, it's the Dodgers. So, like, they both will have the luxury of doing things with him if they need to, presumably, and they have a horrible history of keeping their pitchers healthy. And we don't talk about that, but the track record of the Dodgers of keeping pitchers in their rotation is outrageously bad. And maybe it's circular. They can afford to bring in guys who are high in injury risk because they can afford to bring in lots of guys, and they can afford to still win 100 games even if they have injured pitchers. But if I'm drafting one of their pitchers, they give me no confidence whatsoever that they're going to keep their starting pitchers healthy. Like, it's positive. Obviously, the context is awesome. They're a great team, great bullpen, great line, like all that's awesome. But in terms of health, it's really, really bad. But Sasaki is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean,
if he's going like pick 30, 35, 37, that's people wanting the sexy thing on their team.
Do you buy that sort of like what I suggest, like early third, like late?
Oh
second?
Yeah, I don't know. Like if his stuff plus keeps like his he throws 2 cutters apparently according to like Statcast. People can't help themselves. Like we're suckers. We're suckers. We can't we're alcoholics, and it's an open bar, and they're just handing out the martinis. Like, we cannot say no to that kind of guy. The strikeout number, and there's enough if you want to convince yourself, there are also projections that tell you, like, he's awesome. Give him 140 innings and he's going to be awesome. So you can convince yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just that one report of, like, I almost had Tommy John surgery, but I didn't. But now I'm under contract, so, like, next time something like that comes up, I'm pretty sure he's going to have the Tommy John surgery. Okay. So
sorry for hijacking your podcast, James.
No, that was great. That was great.
It's kind of what I do.
No, I appreciated you kind of pouring some cold water on my Spencer Strider interests. I do think it's possible that he is back before a full month, but we'll see.
Totally. And look, if you get a top 10 starting pitcher at pick 100 for 5 months, which is entirely plausible. It's a great buy. I don't use the word league winner because it's not how fantasy, it's not football, like, it's not how baseball works. But if it works out for you, it could really, really, really work out for you. So it's just like what your mileage may vary in terms of what risk you want to take on. It's like, if I knew more about internal brace surgery, I maybe like if he comes back, I think it's Drew Rasmussen who's also had the internal brace surgery and are just friggin' awesome this season. Then whoever the next guy and the next 5 guys and the next 10 guys, maybe I feel differently. But my bias is that, like, guys don't come back great from that right away.
So, Rob, I usually expect 30 plus saves from if I'm taking a closer in the first 6-7 rounds. I want 30 plus saves, or at least I want to think that I'm getting 30 plus saves. And that's like, I haven't taken Joan Duran the last couple of years just because it seems like he's kind of in the 20 to 25 save bucket. And I haven't considered taking Tanner Scott yet as my number 1 reliever for the same reason, just because they have just this insanely talented bullpen with multiple guys that have more career saves than Tanner Scott, who are coming off fantastic years. So I can't project Tanner Scott for 30 plus saves. But do you buy that? Do you buy the whole, like, need to try to get that amount of saves as a sound approach? Just given where we're at and the way saves just keep getting spread out more and more each year.
Do you take the same approach in FAB leagues as DC leagues? Like, is that your approach in both FAB and DC, or is that more of a DC approach?
For my closer one, like, I want
you want the man, but you're also usually an early closer guy. Like, you have no problem taking a top 5 closer, right? Is that fair?
Yep.
So I think if you're spending a premium draft pick on a guy, you want him to be the guy. You also want him to give you good ratios, and you want him to have big strikeout numbers. So it's an interesting choice if you're using a premium pick on a closer who, barring an injury, and obviously, like, for a Duran, like a Jax could get hurt and suddenly they have no choice but to make him the man. But you don't go into a season or into a draft assuming that kind of thing. So, like, last year, who would you have rather, knowing the full benefit of hindsight? Kyle Finnegan, 135 whip, or Duran? Who do you pick, knowing what the line was that you got? You didn't obviously know that going into the season.
So Kyle Finnegan.
You rather 38 saves with a 135 whip or 23 saves with a 116 whip? Because strikeouts and ERA, they're the same guy.
God, I love whip. And I never take Finnegan.
What guy doesn't love a good whipping? Sorry, Jim.
Man, you really got me in a bind here, Rob.
Well, but this is the philosophical question. Like, I tried to create an actual, like, pillar.
Yeah.
We don't know of a season.
I think I would take Tanner Scott in this hypothetical, just because
I used Duran, but same difference. Like,
sure.
You pick a 20 to 25 save guy. So you write off 15 saves and protect your ratios versus 38 saves and not blow up your ratios. It's not that many innings. Like you can obviously overcome it. I think in a fab league, if the cost is the same, then I'd rather be in a position where if I'm going into July, August, and I'm like 10, 15 saves behind because I've been rolling out 2 closers, but my closer is just getting 2 saves less a month than your closer in Finnegan. I'd rather in a fab league, I know not every year this works out, but if like I'm right in it and I need those extra 10 saves, I count on the fact that I can go find them. And they may be crap saves, like they may be garbage saves, but I can roll out a third closer for a few weeks, or I can do something to catch up. So if the costs were the same, I think I'd rather lean on the good pitcher, but who has a job. With Scott this year in the Dodgers bullpen, the frustrating thing is, like, it's different than Duran. Is Scott this year, you could go an entire month and he's getting 2 saves. And the problem I hate with that kind of a situation is on Monday morning, are you putting him in your lineup? And it's like, well, last week the Dodgers won 6 games. The team got 5 saves and he got none of them. So am I starting him? And that becomes just a real frustrating exercise for me, as opposed to like every 4th save or on back-to-back days, they're going to use somebody else. But I know he will get 2/3 of the saves. So I'm not benching the guy. He's a good pitcher. He's just not getting like 90% the way Kyle Finnegan did last year. Like Kyle Finnegan on a pretty bad Washington team got like an absurd 38 saves out of, I think they had 42, 44 team saves. So like a massive percentage. He is an old Dave Martinez, you'd like old school closer. If there is a 3-run or less lead in the 9th inning, you are going out onto the mound unless it's like the 3rd day in a row that you've pitched. That's awesome. And I don't know, like it's an interesting debate.
Yeah, and I think that splitting it up into fab leagues and DCs is instructive, and I think that you kind of got to the answer that I was sort of, when I asked the question, it just kind of felt like maybe I needed to kind of adjust that a little bit. But it's not just like take Tanner Scott this year, but it's more just kind of there is still a lot of value in a guy that can get you mid-20s saves. And it's just, there aren't, like, once you get past the top 5 or 6 closers, I would probably go with like a David Bednar or a Jeff Hoffman over a Tanner Scott.
I agree with that. There are some like Lex Diaz, I'm not going to draft. There are some guys who just, like, whether it's bias, like I've just seen him blow too many games, I don't trust him to be able to make it through 6 months as the closer. There are some guys I just don't trust, but there are some still, like, we'll see as we get to main season how it shapes up in terms of closer ADP. But there are, like, you mentioned a couple of names. Like, I'd be fine with Bednar and Hoffman as my 2 closers coming out of a draft. And I think there's like an 85% chance both of them keep their job all season, and I'll be right there. And if I need a couple of weeks of a third closer, then I'll get one.
Rob, another player I haven't drafted yet or really considered taking is Michael Toglia, first baseman of the Rockies. I see what I perceive to be a very low batting average floor, especially on the road. But he's being treated like a top 15 first baseman in recent auctions. What do you make of that?
It is on a lot of people's like breakout lists. And,
oh yeah,
like,
I mean, it's not hard to find Michael Toglia propaganda out there.
Yeah, he gives off to me like real strong Franmil Reyes odors, vibes to me, in the sense that why do people love him? So like You extrapolate his stats from last season to a full season. So since he obviously didn't have the job right at the beginning of the season, and you have a 30-10 player playing in Colorado, and more importantly, and this is where the Franmil analogy comes in, the red lollipops. He hits the crap out of the baseball. So if you're a StatCast guy, well, all of those lollipops are really saying the exact same thing. He hits the ball wicked hard. You can say that 14 different ways. It all says really the same thing. And there's no doubt he hits the ball really hard. So I'm also have no interest in him. And in fact, I'm going to be really mean to him the rest of my comments. So 2023, he was the 34th best prospect in the Rockies farm system. Now, James, I have not done 399 podcasts called Farm Futures. Can you tell me, is the Rockies system particularly deep? It's in 2023 that if I'm the 34th best prospect, this is according to Fangraphs. Sorry, I didn't look him up on your rankings. Is that a good thing? Like, was I a highly regarded prospect?
Not really.
I'm just joking. Obviously not. But this is the real problem with Toglia. It's not just the batting average and the swing and miss problems, which is a real thing. So he is third percentile in terms of whiffs against secondary pitches. So against fastballs last year, he had 273 with a 577 slugging and a 20% whiff rate. That's really solid for Toglia. If pitchers throw him fastballs, I have no doubt he could have a really nice season this year. Problem is most pitchers can now throw other pitchers as well, James. Against breaking balls, he hit 151 with a 328 slugging, a 54% whiff. Against off-speed pitches, 150 with a 267 slugging. There is going to be a book on him, and either he is going to adjust, which the year before he didn't adjust either. It was exact same statistic. Either he adjusts or he has a really big risk of not sticking in the majors, not keeping a job, and being in real trouble. Like, he clearly cannot hit breaking balls and off-speed pitches. And until he shows he can, I think he's going to get a steady diet of them. And I want no part of that. There are enough first basemen in drafts going way after him that if I need power, I can find power. Do they have the red lollipops that he has? No. But I can find power. I can find really interesting corner infielders. So I get why people like him, but I don't want any part of him. I think he is more likely to be like buried a year from now than he is to be a 30-10 player that we're saying like, wow, he grew into his power potential and lived up to the hype.
Yeah, I would echo everything you said, and yeah, I agree with you. Like, there's just so many appealing corner infielders, kind of in the late 100s, maybe even like early 200s. But the problem with taking Toglia as a top 15 first baseman in a 15-team league is, like, if you get to May and you can't really use him anymore, like, the replacement level first baseman in a 15-team league is just absolute trash. So,
yes.
Like, you're leaving yourself open to like having to start Carlos Santana all season or something like that.
Yeah, and every week you go to the waiver wire, and there's only one, and it's Carlos Santana. Maybe there's like a pirate, whoever the Pirates first baseman is. Like, Rowdy Tellez is back, and you're drafted Rowdy, like, but it's awful, and yeah, it's bleak. It gets bleak very quickly, and it's a weird roster construction to have like an extra first baseman on your bench just in case. Like, you're not drafting with 7 bench spots that way. So yeah, if I lose because some like Toglia hits 40 home runs and Coors fixes the batting average for him, then that's okay.
Yeah, that is okay. Okay, I mean, this is kind of the zenith of the show, Rob. Chandler Simpson hour. So I mean, I know I could tell right away, like a month ago, whenever you kind of started digging in on baseball stuff, I could tell you were into Chandler Simpson right away.
Yeah.
Chandler Simpson is a prospect who I think has been discussed in my like DMs or text messages the most this entire offseason, just because like from the very beginning of the offseason, it was just kind of like different people like weighing in on how good his defense was, and like reiterating just how 20 his power is. Like the only reason it's a 20 is because you can't hand out 15 grades for Chandler Simpson's power. And then it's just like, how close is he to the big leagues? Well, now spring training's here. He's, causing a stir in camp. He's making diving catches. You've got, every major MLB writer is doing some sort of feature on Chandler Simpson. He's the fastest guy in baseball. He's got a great hit tool, or at least he makes contact at a very high clip. So let's just say we find out Wednesday, March 19th, that Simpson has won the Rays starting center field job.
Yeah, I'd rather we find out like 3:00 Saturday afternoon on the whatever it is. But sure, we'll go with Wednesday.
Yeah, it's Wednesday. Everyone's got time to plan for it. Everyone's like, okay, now I got to adjust my plans for Saturday. So where would he go in main event drafts if everyone knows going into those Saturday drafts that he is lining up for everyday playing time to start the season? And then where would a palatable range be for you in that scenario?
So I'll start with kind of how I would value him, and then we can speculate on where the market would value him, because they're kind of two different things. So he is Luis Arias with graft on, as you say, the best speed, but not just the best speed, also an excellent base stealer. Because it's one thing to be like straight line 40 fast. He stole 100 bases last year in the minors. So you don't steal 100 bases. And I think his cumulative batting average was like 353, 355 across both levels. So like awesome. He also has good plate discipline. So like everything about that is awesome, and no power. So like there's no scenario that he's going to walk into 5 home runs. Like he could hit 5 inside the park home runs, but that's really what you're paying for. So Luis Arias last year, with obviously basically no speed, finished as the 135th player on the player rater. When I run Luis Arias's numbers from last season and give him Elly De La Cruz's stolen bases, which if you assumed that Chandler played like 145 games, which if he's starting center fielder, we're going to play that game. So he has the job, and we assume he's going to play the whole season. He becomes a top 30 player from just a valuation perspective. Arias plus Elly, no home runs, but Elly's stolen bases, and I kept his runs and RBIs at Arias's runs and RBIs because I was lazy on the whole thing. So top 30 player. Now, obviously, I'm not paying for a top 30 player, nor do I think the market would pay for a top 30 player for a couple of reasons. One, the total lack of home runs does create like a wild roster construction distortion. People used to draft, I'm old enough, James, to admit this, like draft Billy Hamilton. And like, it's now easy to remember like end of career Billy Hamilton, where he was basically like a Blanco. He's just hanging around and as a pinch runner. Mm-hmm. But when he was on the Reds, like Billy Hamilton was playing every single day, and he ran up stats because he was playing every single day. And Billy Hamilton, like if you were just like Larry Schechtering, if you're just, I wanted an auction to spend $20 to get $27 of value, that's $7 of profit. If that's all you're doing, I need to get $320 worth of value out of my $260 budget, even if it's a straight draft, then Billy Hamilton made a ton of sense. And Chandler, I think, is going to make a lot of sense because I think he will eventually get a job. I don't think it'll be on opening day. But we actually play a game with categories. So like you need to, the problem with Chandler is he's such a singular talent that if I'm in an auction and I can nominate him as the first player, so I know I have him, and then let's say I spent $20 on him, and now I have $240 to fill out the rest of my roster, then I can start buying just and then now like Schwarber is like awesome. Like every power guy with a low batting average, I can absorb them. Like power guys, or at least I can absorb a couple of them. So suddenly I've like made up for the power and I have the batting average and the speed. In a straight draft, it's really tough because if like you and I are in the same draft and you jump him 2 picks before me, who do I fall back on? There is nobody to fall. Like if I need the batting average and I need the speed, so Arias does half of it for me, and then there's speed guys who don't give me the batting average. So it's really, really tough in a straight draft. How do you go into a draft with a guy who's so like such a unicorn, because there is nobody else? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So here's my theory on sort of how to value him in this sort of scenario where he is playing a ton this year.
Yeah.
Is like I would almost value him, or I would project him for just 30 steals, because I wouldn't want him in my lineup for more than like 30 steals because of how much he's going to damage my RBI and my home runs. And that was, I think, like, I'm not blaming you for not taking the time to adjust Luis Arias's RBI, but I mean, I would take the major under on 46 RBI for Chandler Simpson this year.
You don't think infield singles can drive in enough runs from third?
I mean, he could do some.
That's not even fair. Like he has no power. He hits the ball to the outfield. Like it's not like he is like such a slap guy that he's just bunting constantly. Like he has a hit tool. He can hit line drives.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think he can, but I also think he's also a guy, he hasn't even faced AAA pitching yet. So I don't think he is breaking camp, just to be clear. I love the guy. I don't think he's breaking camp. I think his past, they also love DeLuca. So like, I don't think they, as intriguing a player is, and I do think he has a future on Tampa. There's nothing he can do in spring training if DeLuca is healthy to beat him out. What are his paths during the season, though? Like a Josh Lowe injury, a DeLuca injury. Christopher Morel, it turns out, cannot play left field at a major league level. Christopher Morel can't hit at a major league level. Like, these are all not crazy scenarios. And if any one of them happens, I can easily see him getting playing time. He's a guy that I would much rather take in a DC for this season to have on my bench. And if it works out, it could be awesome. For, as you say, 10 weeks of him could spring me up like 15 points in both batting average and stolen bases. If it doesn't work out, it's a DC pick that didn't work out. Right. Like that's just the dream, is just having him as just this sort of ace up your sleeve for like July, August. You run up the stolen bases and then you kind of see how much you need him down the stretch. So very, very fascinating player. Did you have any, what do you think like the high stakes market is? Like, remove what you think, but like, do you think there's going to be this like push on Chandler Simpson if he hasn't gotten reassigned to minor league camp in Vegas?
No. So I don't think that unless there is real noise from like credible sources, he's about to break camp. I don't think he gets drafted in mains. But he's a guy who will go for $100 in FAB, $100 plus the day he gets called up if he has a job. Like, unless he's getting called up to sit on the bench, it's possible. Like, you call up a fourth outfielder. But if he gets called up and has a job, there are 3 teams in every single league who need stolen bases and batting average. And so somebody's going to blow the bank on him very quickly.
Okay, Rob. So time to talk about another prospect with Rob Silver.
This is why you bring me on. I'm the prospect guy. Which is ridiculous, because people who don't know me, I'm the last. Like, I am the 3rd percentile in terms of prospect knowledge of anybody James could have on this podcast. So I appreciate this.
Yes, but even so,
yes,
you have nailed a few
the last 3 years.
The last 3 years. Jeremy Pena 3 years ago, Michael Garcia a couple of years ago, Mason Wynn last year. Just massive values relative to their ADP. Who is this year's Rob Silver prospect sleeper?
So I have two guys, and both of them are we're still pretty early in spring training. So I'm not hedging. If they don't make the opening day roster, then I obviously feel less confident. I felt more confident about all three of those guys making the team at this point of spring training than I do about either of these guys. So that's the disclaimer. Obviously, if they're in AAA on opening day, then that changes my view. So I have two different guys. First one, maybe this is now the trendy thing to say, so I'm sorry, but I looked at ADP today. It hasn't reflected in it yet. Cam Smith. I think he's 10 days away from being this year's Jackson Merrill. And that may sound absurd, but I don't think it's any more absurd than this point of spring training if I had said you should be all over Jackson Merrill. So what's the case? Well, the very easy case is I think he's much better than Mauricio Dubon, much better than Brendan Rodgers. And I don't think Houston's good enough to be messing around with dead spots in their lineup, because you can make a pretty good argument they have two dead spots in their outfield already. So I think that if he could force their hand in the next 2 weeks and leave them no choice but to be their opening day third baseman. And Paredes just moves to second base. And I don't think there's any reason to think that he's not their best option right now as basically their second baseman, even if he's not playing second base.
Yeah, that's a fun one. You didn't run that one by me ahead of time, so I didn't know where you were going with that.
James, you think that's crazy?
That's kind of out of character for you too, because this is like a legit pedigree top 30 prospect. Usually,
but he's not being drafted. But he's not being drafted like that right now.
Of course, because I just don't think anyone went into spring training thinking he had even a shot at a job.
Obviously, when I compare him to Jackson Merrill, that's one that worked out stupendously. Mm-hmm. What's your gut on how he handles major league pitching if I'm right and he does break camp as in their lineup?
Well, I agree with your theory that he's better than Brendan Rodgers and Mauricio Dubon.
That is damning with faint praise. That is right. Not a huge. He's really better than Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers has a career 70 WRC plus away from Ford Field, so that's not a massive statement saying he's better than Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be kind of 260, 20 homers, something like that would be a very great rookie season for Cam Smith, I think. Just given his past, stops, he just has not much experience against upper level pitching.
Yeah. So then my second one is way more obscure and way more in character. And chasing this is the one I did run by you. So I think if Chase my draw makes the White Sox opening day roster, then he is going to be a 10-15 285 player this year. That's basically Stephen Kwan. And Stephen Kwan is not everybody's cup of tea in terms of fantasy player, but Stephen Kwan has been a top 150 player each of the last 3 years. So you may say, Rob, why are you hyping me Stephen Kwan that with more risk than Stephen Kwan? I don't even want Stephen Kwan. Just saying, fantasy wise, Stephen Kwan is pretty valuable as a fantasy player. So let me make the case for him. So he came over from the Red Sox, obviously, in the big trade this winter. He has the lowest chase rate in AAA last year. AAA chase rate has the highest correlation of any statistic between AAA and the majors. So having the highest AAA chase rate or the best chase rate in AAA is a very good thing. He had the highest OBP in the International League in his second year in the league. Red Sox beat writers, if you like going with Narrative Street and beat writers leaking kinds of things, said he was the toughest player for the White Sox to get into the trade. I think he is probably the White Sox best player as of today, which again may not mean I know most people would say Luis Robert, but I don't know that Robert can stay healthy. So I think he should be their leadoff hitter. I think his on-base percentage is going to play in the majors. The laziest comp, and I assume every prospect guy ever has made this, is Dustin Pedroia. Their stats at this point in the minors are freakishly the same. Majdroth in his minor league career has 1,147 plate appearances, 20 home runs, 30 stolen bases, a 285, 425, 408 line, so an 833 OPS. Dustin Pedroia in his minor league career, 1,289 plate appearances, 21 home runs, 11 stolen bases, and an 823 OPS, basically identical, with a little bit more speed for Majdroth. If he could have Dustin Pedroia's career, I think Dustin Pedroia has a little bit more power than him. I think he may have a little bit more stolen base upside. Obviously, the league context has changed a little bit. If he could have anything like Dustin Pedroia's career, then it was a really nice pickup for the White Sox. And I think he's, again, if he is their opening day shortstop, then I think it's a really nice pick this year in fantasy, and he'll go in the 30th round right now.
Yeah, and I remember when that trade happened, I went to the White Sox Steamer 600 page right away, because obviously it's a terrible team with terrible talent, and he's a shortstop, or at least as much of a shortstop as any of their guys are. And so I looked at the Steamer 600 back when the trade happened, and he came out as their best player, which didn't surprise me. That's why I went looking. Not their best hitter, but they're a top 5 hitter on their team. And then you factor in the defense, and then you get to Rob's case that he's their best player. So yeah, that one is very Rob Silver-esque, and I dig it.
So where I dislike, sorry to interrupt, James, where I dislike it compared to Jeremy Pena, Michael Garcia, and Mason Wynn, is all three of those guys had defense as a carrying tool to some degree or others, but all of them are plus infielders. Wynn's arm is obviously ridiculously good. Chase Majdroth does not have his defense as a carrying tool. Why do I care about that for fantasy? Because rookies struggle sometimes for a month. But if I'm Jeremy Pena and I'm playing a really good shortstop for Houston, and I've just lost Carlos Correa, if I'm Mason Wynn and they need me to solidify the middle infield, so they'll give me a little bit more time. That gives me as a pick a little bit more rope to be right. Here, I don't have that rope, I don't think.
Yeah. And you're totally right about that, right? Like, he's not on that level, and it's almost more of a, like, Majdroth's case to me really hinges on just how bad his teammates are.
Yes.
Like Colson Montgomery is just like, he's just not ready for big league pitching at all, and he's a worse defensive shortstop than Majdroth. So yeah, it's easy to see. Like, I can at least see Majdroth's path to 500 plus plate appearances.
And walks play. Like, if he can walk, he will get on base. Doesn't help me fantasy wise a ton, because nobody's driving him in after he walks necessarily. And
I thought the Stephen Kwan comp was very valid as sort of like a ceiling type of, like, if it all works out thing. And it's not about, I'm not someone who takes Stephen Kwan in the top 150, but if I could get Stephen Kwan at pick 450, yeah, of course, so.
Yep.
All right, Rob, get you out of here on a fun one, an easy one. Who is the hitter you expect to hit for the lowest average that you're also willing to / expecting to end up drafting in a couple weeks?
So first I wanted to ask you, I won't go long, but a philosophical question. When you go into a main event draft, how do you approach batting average for your main events, or for any draft?
Like,
do you eliminate guys? Say, if I think you are going to hit below 220 or 225, I'm just not touching you? Or do you want, like, I'll take 2 of you, but I need to balance it off? Like, how do you just keep, like, do you rotolab it and see where my batting average is, and as long as it's looking good, I can take a bit of a hit late?
Honestly, I don't draft anyone I think is going to hit like 225 or less.
Okay.
I don't go through and like make sure that I've eliminated all those guys, but like I'm never drafting a hitter that I expect to hit 225, period.
Okay. That's a pretty good approach. If you do that, especially in a world like we live in now, where like if your team batting average is 255, you're doing pretty good. If you don't have anybody under 225, and you have some guys who are obviously above where you need to be, it can work out. The guy I'm willing to take a shot on, that is not projected for great batting average, I mentioned just before, Christopher Morel. He hit obviously like 198, I think, last season. A bit of that was fluky, but he was also really, really bad last season, and the batting average is ugly. I think he's a much better hitter than that. I think he does better than that. And I think that what I like about him, first off, the cost. He's really, really cheap right now. And I think I'll know a month in whether Christopher Morel has figured it out and is like where he looked like he was heading on the Cubs with Tampa this year, or I feel confident enough. It's not like going back to the Chandler conversation. It's not like I built my whole team around Christopher Morel. Like hopefully he's my fifth outfielder, sixth out, like D8 utility kind of thing. So that if I'm wrong and it's May 15th and he's sucking, I can move on for that. And I don't think it's sunk my team. But I like at his cost, Christopher Morel bounce back. So I would take a bit of a batting average risk on.
I love that call.
Who's your guy?
I thought you were going to say Jose Siri.
I love Jose Siri. Yeah, I love Jose Siri, but no, it's not Jose Siri.
So my guy, maybe like Ryan Jeffers.
Yeah,
like
Ryan Jeffers is. We were talking about him on the Launch Angle Cup last week, 2 weeks ago. Power's legit. Like he's a good hitter at this point, Ryan Jeffers.
Yeah, and so I would think he'd hit maybe like 230, 235. Maybe 240, but like that's about as low as I'll go for.
I put a bit of an asterisk on this question for catchers. Like I know you're a early catcher guy. Mm-hmm. It's hard to be religious in terms of I will never draft a catcher who's projected to hit 230 because you may not have a catcher to draft at that point.
Yeah, it'd be bad process to go into a draft and just say I'm only taking one of these 6 catchers for my 2 catchers.
Well, I mean, you'll end up with like Alejandro Kirk and like Dave Marino, but it's weird to say I must have these 2 guys.
Yeah, but it is like to that point, like Alejandro Kirk is a backup option that I'm okay with. Like if I miss on this guy, I don't mind if Alejandro Kirk's my catcher too.
There's definitely something to be said about catchers who don't kill you if you don't spend the money on early catchers.
Yeah, exactly. Rob, this has just been fantastic. I really appreciate your flexibility and running along with me here. So thank you so much, man. It's been fantastic.
See you in Vegas in mere days.
Yeah, I will see you in Vegas shortly. This has been the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast brought to you by Fantrax.